Services. I'm the chair of the Business Retention and Workforce Development Committee, as well as incoming chair to the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you all for being here. That's obviously, we have a good program for you today, looking at the crowd. That's exciting. I'd like to start off with everybody taking a minute to stand and face the flag and do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. This program is not brought to you today with the support of our friends in the library who are the sponsors of today's meeting. At 10 on the morning we'll go. We are going to have a speaker. We're going to have that done by 8:30, and then there'll be time for networking afterwards again. We do have some new members in the audience today. You're going to get a chance after the speaker to introduce yourselves. Before we do that, I want to make sure we recognize our member of the month, Stan House. If you could stand up, please. Introduce yourself. And please tell us the committee that you're on as well.
Okay, I'm Ann Krause with the Century Insurance, and I am a part of the advocacy committee.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Anyone else that is on a committee or on the board of the chamber, please stand up and be recognized. These are the please stand up. Matt? Oh. No, you're not on board. These are your volunteers that help make this organization go on. We are conscious about our organization, the chamber. If you're here to this group, we want you involved. Your chamber, you make it happen, all right? So with that, no further ado, I introduce Mr. Tim Day. He is now, with a new promotion, the senior manager of Escambia County. Thank you, Tim.
Shut it down. Well, while this is warming up, I'll introduce myself. My name's Tim Day. I've worked for Escambia County for 19 years. I see a fair number of familiar faces here out on the key, and I'm glad to see some new faces. For the county, I've got a variety of roles out here. Of course, the Habitat Conservation Plan is part of my. Okay. Well, I'm trying to turn off. All right. There we go. So, obviously, one of the big things I do will be the Perdido Key Habitat Conservation Plan, and I won't do much on that. We've got 20 slides or so on it. Other duties I have, and the last slide has all my contact information, but I do mosquito control, marine resources, so once you leave the beach and go in the water, it's underneath. Water quality and land management, so it's like the Jones Swamp Preserve, if y'all have gotten off the key. We've got 1,300 acres of trails that we manage, and environmental code enforcement. So I've got kind of a broad swath. But the very first thing I was here to do really was environmental nature, which was kind of both wetlands, when the county first ventured off into wetland regulation. And really my primary work really has been here on both of our beaches. So on Pensacola Beach, I manage the beach nourishment program and beach repairs. After the tide hit us, I managed to rebuild the dunes. Y'all seen we recently put 600,000 native plants out on the beach this spring. So we have a constant program where we're working to build stronger dunes. There is, of course, good habitat components that work with that, but one of the bigger things it does is, a good resilient dune system in front of development. When we do get that storm, it helps minimize the impacts of the storm surge. So with that, since we're functional, we'll get started. And so please let me know if I'm not projecting well enough. I'm more than happy to continue with 360 and we'll get through it. I will have plenty of times for questions at the end. I'll stay as long as people want. And with that, we'll get started. So the first several slides really is going to be based on a history of what's happened on the island in terms of some of the critters that are out here, as well as, why does the county currently have a habitat conservation plan. So the kind of our star out here is the Perdido Key beach mouse. It was listed by the state in '75. It was federally listed as endangered in 1985. Critical habitat, which really just means that in the Code Federal Registry, there's literally a map that says what's critically important to the mouse to survive in the wild. Kind of in the Wayback Machine, some of the older chamber members or some of the more experienced chamber members will probably remember we had a spin-off of the Got Milk campaign, the Got Habitat campaign, that it was good and successful. Other than like the life education programs kind of died off. Where the regulations on the island really got interesting was in February of 2004. During the construction of Florencia, there was, they needed an Army Corps permit, and they thought, hey, this is really close to the state park, maybe we need to have the service check for mice. And on Florencia, there wasn't an issue. But at the same time, across the street, there was a different developer who was getting ready to do a kind of a cottage project. And the service asked for permission to go and take a look for mice. And on the first night, they found mice. And from that point, we went from, let's say from a regulatory stance, we went from believing mice were only out on the primary duty to now knowing that they're also in the secondary, tertiary duties. And due to a legal opinion from our attorney, the county stopped issuing building permits in the habitat areas because the feds essentially suggested if we issue permits where we reasonably know take of a listed animal occur, the county is also liable for that take. So it's not just on the private property owner who's moving forward, it's also on the county.
Yeah, but it's nothing to do with you, won't get you in hot water law, it has to do with the question.
Yeah.
Maybe you were the only man that fell home right now. Why did the natural habitat for the Perdido Key beach mouse disappear on the Alabama side of the line right after 2004?
I don't know that answer.
Okay, just the next point, that all of a sudden this great big habitat area, which is over there where the public area beaches are,
Yep.
just all of a sudden disappeared. It's like they just come to the state line and they, like the Alabama, they don't like ongoing water.
Yeah, it's when they redid it in 2006, the Panama Field office where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has our area. At that time, even the service kind of said, look at the state line, all things do. Even though the Perdido Key beach mouse goes all the way to Gulf State Park, still in Orange Beach, right at their pass. And I suspect what happened was when the Panama Field office redesignated that habitat, they brought it to the state line, didn't coordinate with the field office in Alabama, and that may have magically happened.
I think with it. Thanks.
So, just very quickly, most everyone's familiar with sea turtles. They're probably the most charismatic of our megafauna. All of our sea turtles that nest here are listed as threatened or endangered. Most notable, the loggerhead in 2013 on the beaches of Perdido Key, there was critical habitat on the bathing beach established. So the two photos, one is from this year. The upper left is simply a crawl that resulted in the nest that came down. The nest below is a nest from last year. You can see kind of 4 stakes that we usually will wrap a little flagging tape around just to help minimize the amount of foot traffic that actually go over the nest. Shorebirds are a lot harder to see when you're out on the beach. We don't, really the main area for shorebirds we have on the key essentially is kind of the residential area that's down by Eden. And the bulk of that is simply because we have far less people utilizing the beach. So as the birds try to nest and utilize the beaches, they don't have folks that are walking by and disturbing them. But the one thing that I would encourage, for those of you that are out on our beaches, if you've noticed, a lot of our areas have the primary dune comes down, and then there's a little open area of the beach, and then there's another set of dunes that have popped up closer to the Gulf. That picture in the bottom left, if you look carefully, you can see 3 eggs or 4 eggs sitting there. That's an area that usually doesn't have a lot of people. The birds utilize it, and even if you know what to look for, it's easy to accidentally step on a nest. The bottom right, if you can see both birds there, there's a fledgling on the far right. The way birds do is they don't avoid predators by flying away. They try to get small and hide and hope that no one sees them. So it's from a management point, they're hard to work with because as things are happening, they don't really want to get out of the way. They want to hunker down and hide.
So coyotes over there?
We do. Yep. That's a challenging predator to deal with.
Which one?
Coyotes. And it's, of course, coyotes, you can't, really we have to bring in a USDA trapper to do it because, it's not like we can send animal control out in a dog trap to get it. They're smart enough to, not walk into a trap. So what kind of started off the process for the Habitat Conservation Plan? So as I mentioned, in 2004, we ultimately had to kind of come to an end on issuing permits in mouse habitat. At that time, my board said, well, it's an issue here for the key. The landowners can just deal with U.S. fish by themselves. We're just not gonna get in the middle of it. After about a year of pressure from landowners out here looking for just any type of solution to help keep things moving, we started a partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation. And so there was a number of documents that came out in 2005. The first was the development of a conservation strategy, which very simply is just, if mice are going to persist in the wild out here on the key, what are the key elements that we need to do and manage in order to help facilitate that? Well, once you have that plan, you really need to find out, well, we have this great plan, but what does it cost to implement? And so in 2005, we contracted with RCF Economic and Financial Consulting to go and put a dollar value on, if we're going to do this conservation plan, what's it cost? And it was a monster number. So in negotiations between 3 agencies and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners, two mitigation fees were agreed upon, which was if someone goes and develops in mouse habitat, there's an upfront impact fee of $100,000 per acre of impact. It's not a lot, so if you own a 1 acre lot, you're not converting that whole acre into a footprint. You're realistically with your building, your drives, the infrastructure you put in. Most developments somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an acre. So it'll shrink just a little bit. Secondarily, those that get permits ultimately will be assessed a $201 annual fee that's based on either one per residential unit, one per commercial parking space, or for hotels, one per live unit. The dollars expected at full build out that's generated from these funds is right at 50% what it's expected to fund the full conservation plan. So one of the other things I have to do is, for the first running, is I've got to somehow get enough grant money to cover the other half. So that was all finalized in December of 2005 through the intergovernmental agreement. And really what it was is, it was something that says, you know, we agreed on monies, the county's gonna hold the funds for expenditures only on the key. And what it did is it created mitigation that was uniform for all the agencies. So at least if someone wanted to come build, they could, you know, design a project and they would know how to design it in terms of what it should look like and what is my bottom line cost. So we had our celebratory dance, and then unfortunately realized we still haven't fixed the federal government's process. So even though we already have a predictable outcome, in general, it was taking U.S. Fish 3.5 years to issue a permit for someone to build a single-family house. If you were going to do a small tower or a commercial development, it was taking up to 5 years. WCI had a painful 8-year process, and theirs was actually extended beyond that with a third-party challenge. So in 2006, also curious people realizing, hey, this, you know, thank you for your efforts, but it's still broken. We still can't, you know, if someone wanted to come and, if you wanted to invite someone to develop something commercially, obviously part of that process is, you know, they got to build a business model. Here's my trips. Here's what I'm expecting to do it. And of course, you've got a limited time to get your infrastructure on the ground to know that you should have something viable. Obviously, that wasn't happening. And so in 2006, we got some grant money from U.S. Fish to develop a habitat conservation plan. In 2007, the engineering firm Atkins was awarded the contract. It took us all the way to 2011 negotiating with state and federal agencies and with input from the public to actually get the plan completed and submitted to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And part of that federal process, it still took them to 2014 to issue the permit so we can, you know, start this program. And we'll go into those details, but it's the frustrating part with feds. If you think, you know, if a county or a municipality is coming forward and they're agreeing to all these things, here's how we can take workload off of you. We'll give you a predictable response on terms of what development will look like. We're all in agreement. And as you can see, it's, you know, for us, it's still a 7-year process. So benefits for both the federal agencies and local government. Just as we go forward with the benefits of it, it's, you know, I can't emphasize enough how much better it is than when it was wholly done by the service. So a lot of text, and I apologize. There's going to be a couple slides with a lot of text. But so what the HCP is, it's a tool that the county can utilize to facilitate both private development and public infrastructure projects while maintaining the protected requirements of the Endangered Species Act. We're areas where the mouse has been determined to exist by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We have a 30-year permit that allows us to authorize development of 66 acres, and that's not 66. You know, 66 acres worth of parcels, it's literally 66 acres of development. The benefit of it is these permits are processed through our normal county permit process and timelines. You know, so if you submit for a single family home, you submit the set of plans and how you're going to fit into the habitat conservation plan. Typically when I get a full submittal, I can turn that permit around in a week. For larger commercial development or say condo development, it usually takes me 2 to 3 weeks to process that same permit. And the only difference is obviously the plans on condo are far more complex than what's on a single family. But we're now in a period, you know, for people who want to come in and invest in the key, we can provide feedback in a period of weeks where before, you know, you may have to wait 3 years to decide if maybe you're going to get a permit. So the highlights, it provides a landscape approach for habitat conservation while we facilitate a predictable process for owners to utilize their property. One of the things that I'll do, since everything ultimately at this point funnels through me, is we'll try to line development up on, you know, on one side or the other of the property line. It help create mouse corridors so that they can move north and south, so they can move east and west. And so with that, it helps make it predictable, the owners who gets to utilize their property. But from a wildlife perspective, we're able to make sure that, the house interests are protected as well. So on Perdido Key, there is a total of 273 acres that have been identified by U.S. Fish and Wildlife as habitat. And we have ability for impact of 66 acres. When we get a couple slides in, we'll be able to show what that kind of looks like. If we have an owner that for some reason can't kind of fit in the box that I have to live in terms of what I can issue a permit under, that property owner always has the ability to opt out and go negotiate a separate permit on their own with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So it allows someone who, for some reason, just doesn't believe they can make something work under the county process. There's an ability for them to pursue that otherwise. This process is designed to save money, effort, time, and resources for development projects. And the other benefit that you get with this is, since this is a multi-species HCP that covers plants, animals, the whole litany of endangered wildlife on the island, when you get a permit through us, it covers you from incidental take with all of these species. So, under the county HCP, owners can pursue development ventures in accordance with our current rules and regulations and enjoy the benefit of legal protection for any take that may occur for approved impacts. Additionally, an applicant may propose full development on a parcel based on existing property rights allowed by zoning, such as density or intensity. So, in order to assure all property owners on the key will have an ability to have a full build-out scenario, we do work with the property owners to minimize their footprint and utilize vertical construction to the extent feasible. Ultimately, the job I have is try to make sure that 66 acres gets applied evenly to all property owners on the key. So we will encourage cluster development on a lot versus a sprawling development, that's, for example, a large lot subdivision would be discouraged, but it's something that utilizes townhomes or something that clusters that residential density is what would be encouraged. Under the Habitat Conservation Plan, we're able to also permit minor improvements to Perdido Key Drive, such as turn lanes associated with private development and the up-and-coming multi-use path. Within the HCP itself, it specifically excludes major improvements such as previous discussions on the 4-lane Perdido Key Drive. So, although I hate to have tables in this, what this particular slide talks about is, on the left-hand column is our zoning categories, although in this table, since this predates the renaming of zoning we did a couple years ago, those are the old zoning categories that all they did was rename them. And so on the far right, what it shows is the breakout of acreages that will be allotted per zoning category for development. And I'll just do a couple of them. R1 PK, which is primarily the residential area that's by E, the large lots that front the Gulf. We're able to do 1.3 acres a take. Because of their distance off the highway, those developments typically would use somewhere around 0.2 of an acre per house. So you can start doing that. It sounds like a tiny number, but when this was done, the goal was to make sure that everyone had reasonable use of their property. So, current status of take for the HCP. So, as I've talked before, there's 66 acres over 30 years. permits on a 5-year basis. We're able to permit 11 acres every 5 years that's unevenly split through the zoning categories. Our renewal, or our next allocation of take is going to be December 5th of 2014. And so currently in LDR, MDR, and HDR, which is the old R1, 2, and 3, we've issued all the permits that are available for that first 5 years. So for properties that are in that zoning category, the next availability is December 5th. And the way the county handles it, if you've been here for a long time, back in 2006, when we were bumping up against the density cap for development, what the county did is allowed developments to go ahead and submit projects and get in a queue so that as projects didn't go forward, that they would just funnel those forward as became available. The same thing's going to work with the HCP in this fashion. It's, so if someone wants, their single family house in MDR, they can work with consultants, get a permit application in me. I do not collect fees for that coming in, but it puts them in a queue, so when I start issuing permits in that zoning category again in December of next year, that we'll go straight down the list and offer the ability to go ahead and move forward. And if they say yes, they'll pay their fees and move forward. If they say no, then we'll simply, put them off to the side and we'll go with someone who's ready to go. So in these first 4 years, what's happened? And so we've issued permits for single-family homes. We've issued 54 permits. Not all of those have started yet, obviously. We've issued permits on 2 multifamily structures or multifamily developments, and we've issued 2 commercial developments. And as I mentioned before, kind of where we've got a queue starting up for permits pending. There's a couple in LDR, 3 in MDR, and 5 homes in high density residential. So there's definitely some queues that are showing, people want to come here, people want to live here, and they're willing to invest a little time and money to make that happen. Of those 11 acres, we've issued just under 7.5 acres to date. And as part of a tally, on those 7.5 acres to take, once you get your permit, what's not part of your actual development will ultimately be placed into conservation with deed restrictions. Because you build your house, and for example, instead of a sodded yard, what you'll have is you'll go back with natural native cultural plants and you'll restore habitat. And so we've issued a permit for 7.5 acres. As a result of the permitting, there's been just shy of 10 acres that have gone into conservation as well. So, as I talked about the phase take, we get that ability every 5 years to get that next 11 acres. So it's not an absolute automatic. So this is kind of the hook that U.S. Fish has with the county to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. This first 5 years, the bar is very high. All we have to do is show that we've got PKBM west of the state park, which we do, the mouse numbers. We need to be working on a feral or free-roaming cat control program. And we need to have, in this first 5 years, have acquired and rezoned 3 acres of habitat for preservation purposes. So this is just an example of a single-family home. In general, north of 292, our general guidance is to avoid about half the habitat on the property. So sorry, it's not hatched different ways to illustrate it better. But this is an example of a single-family house that has 49% impact. And as you can see on the lots, essentially, they almost have full utilization within the building setbacks. So that 50% avoidance does sound like a lot, but once you add setbacks into it, that amount of developable space isn't that unusual for how folks would normally develop. And so normal kind of permit conditions, include trying to leave half the property available for mounds. And if your lot gets too small, I do have some lots that have exceeded that 50%, just so that they can get kind of a usual and typical home for that subdivision. So we're working, trying to make sure we maintain the character of our existing developments while still managing protection. So their yards will utilize coastal native landscaping. We'll utilize reduced lighting on the outside. It's really more about what you need to be safe versus fully illuminating the yard. Your exterior windows will utilize what's generically referred to as turtle glass. Really, all that means it either has a film on it or as part of the construction. They put some gas in it that actually reduces the amount of light that leaves your home. So you can keep utilizing lights as you normally would inside the house, and we just rely on windows to reduce that amount of light getting out onto the habitat that's now outside the yard. And of course, the mitigation fees we talked about earlier. So the county's collecting all these funds. What are we utilizing it for? We do, most years we do at least one survey to evaluate the entirety of the population from Johnson Beach all the way to Gulf State Park. So it's a key-wide survey. Excuse me. We'll do habitat restoration projects, land acquisition, and sorry for not having a great contrasting number, but if you look right here next to WCI's property, there's some 24 acres right there that used to be a development that was going to be called Magnolia West. With mitigation monies, we actually purchased that property in 2014, 12. Sorry, I should have had that off the top of my head, but sometimes these things blur just a little bit. But that property was acquired solely out of the Beach Mouse Fund, and the primary intent is for conservation because those back dunes there. We need to have sufficient back dunes available for beach mice, to say another item. It's an ability for the mice to go off the primary dunes, to recover the secondary dunes, and as we get primary dune recovery, then they'll migrate south again. A secondary benefit of land acquisition through the HCP for conservation purposes is, I mentioned very briefly earlier, the density cap that we still have on the key. Our current zoning far exceeds what the density cap is. So there's some benefits that if we're able to tie up, not a whole lot of land, but tie up a couple parcels, bring down the total density available on the key so it gets a little closer to the cap, it's going to minimize conflicts with the county and landowners, kind of at the end of the game as we approach full build out. Other kind of primary things that it'll fund, it has funded translocations between the anchor communities, which is Johnson Beach, Perdido Key State Park, and Gulf State Park in Alabama. It'll provide for education, which in this next year will be starting up. And additionally, I'll be able to get someone other than me to do it. We're getting close. So just a couple things that have happened as a result of the Habitat Conservation Plan. One of the things we talked about, a fair amount is turtles. But what we passed a year ago was Section 3300 of the Code of Ordinances, which is the VFD Habitat Conservation Ordinance. And so it has provisions like leave no trace or leave only footprints, whatever your favorite catch term is for it. But essentially it's trying to find ways for folks to manage items on the beach. And so ideally, we go from the picture on the right that has all the tent frames and all the personal belongings on the beach. The one on the left has as much personal belongings, but you can sort of see two piles on either side of that condo. They've built some beach racks so that the people, they don't have to haul it all the way back to the room, but they take it, they condense it, and it minimizes the seaweed or rat management program. So when the seagrass washes up on the beach for the first 2 or 3 days, you know, if you go, you pick through it, it's full of tiny little, little snails, little fish, all kinds of life. The shorebirds will walk through it, pick through it, and it's an important source of food for them. If we get an enormous amount of it, like we periodically do, and we all know what happens about 3 days later and we start getting the odor, it still allows, whether it's individual owners or your beach share company, where they can go ahead and rack it up, or rake it up, take it to the base of the human bury it. So the idea is still balancing the needs of nature, so we're not doing it every day. But once it becomes a nuisance or a perceived human health issue, there's still an ability to go ahead and deal with it and take care of it. And so the other thing that happens here on the Key, because we utilize code enforcement, if there's an issue on the beach, code enforcement isn't going to deal with the renter. If it's a rental situation, we always deal with the property owner. And it's really because by statute, that's how code enforcement works, is we work with property owners. That's different than Pensacola Beach, which has kind of a sister ordinance. We actually have crews who just go down the beach, and once you hit 9 o'clock, if you're not attending your equipment, they throw it back in the truck and haul it on the beach for you. Perdido Key is vastly different. As we all know, the beach and Perdido Key are private. So I don't have an innate ability like we do on Pensacola Beach with the county as the owner. Even if I desired to as a rogue staff member or something, I can't send someone down that beach and collect things out of people's backyards. So the other, or thankfully for everyone, is also the last slide. Artificial lighting. In the last 5 years out on the Key, we've made great strides, mostly through awareness and education. And we've had some funding come to the county where we're assisting with retrofits. Sea Turtle Conservancy has done at least 5 condos out here with BP associated funding. And so the point of this slide is if you come under this new construction under the mounds permit, you are required to utilize minimal lighting for the purposes of health and safety. The Florida Building Code does prescribe how much light you need when you walk through a threshold. So you're still going to have all that light, you're going to have those lumens, you're going to be safe. But for example, the home on the left, you're not going to have large decorative lighting. The part that's interesting on both of these is these are both what I would call almost compliant. The condo on the right, obviously it's very dark, it's called front condo. It was just when they constructed, it appears that they forgot to utilize the tinting of the turtle glass on the lower level. Probably because no one anticipated that they would be leaving lights on overnight in some of the common areas. The house on the left, if you look carefully below the white lights, you can see red lights or orange lights. That's actually the light we want. You can see the red light doesn't hardly spread out beyond the footprint, but it does keep it illuminated. And so just a short tweak and both of these can be compliant. I'll be working with them to get to that point. So as part of education, that's now a very old picture of my children. But when you do some of the work, extra hours, you seek all the help you can get. So we periodically will have some volunteer events, and kids are always welcome, adults are welcome too. But with that, I will open it up for questions.
Questions for Tim? Kathy?
about the land that built Sundown property by contract, which was purchased by the county, and I thought were critical habitat. Gives me
property in particular highlighted for HCP funds acquisition is, that was purchased 100% with Beach Mouse funding that came through the conservation fund through development that it contributed into it. The difference between that and what's at the Sundown property, it has very, very important habitat on it. And it was, there was 3 parcels selected by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The first one actually is the triangle to the left, which is the old Pat Siegler or now Bobby Cox parcel. Number 2 is the Mag West parcel, which we acquired. The third parcel was the Sundown because of the high dune system that exists on it. The funding for that came from a U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant, so it came from outside conservation money with a contribution from the board with local option sales tax. So it is all conservation funding, but it's slightly different because with the Sundown parcel, you know, there was anticipated to have some use on it. It was never defined how much use would be on it, and you know, we're working through the process to see what the appropriate amount of use will be.
It was purchased with conservation funds, but not from the HCP.
It was back here. There are mice on it, yes. That was part of what I've done over the last week, is reconfirm that mice are there. So, what the mix for Sundown had federal monies brought in, and it was 75% federal. 25% was local, because when the feds give you that conservation money, you know, they don't just give it to you. They want you to have skin in the game, so they do require a match. When the grant was obtained, you know, it did have public access as a component of it, but the problem is it never specified to what extent. And so it's this past Monday I met with U.S. Fish on the site, and we're working through a due diligence process to see what's going to be appropriate for that public utilization without compromising habitat qualities.
You know, you mentioned Gulf State Park. It seems to me that you can mitigate all that miles of beach down to pretty fast then, huh?
It's at
Because it is an island, right?
it is an island.
Somebody would maybe want to ask
Yes.
about that,
Well, ultimately that'll be both a board decision and City of Orange Beach decision. They have indicated that, you know, they've seen our plan working, they would love to somehow become a part of it. But there's, you know, devil's in the detail on that.
But there might be, that may be another habitat area, right?
There is a possibility to extend the county HCP,
Right.
you know, into Alabama. To me as a manager, would have a lot of benefits, just because then, you know, on our side of the island, part of it's tied to how well they're doing in Alabama. So, and of course, that's completely outside of our control. And, you know, the ability to seek grants, you know, once you're a multi-state concept, it puts you in a unique place for leveraging additional funds.
Right.
So it's a good concept, but it's,
Well, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, of course, the problem is there, that their line stops, they don't do it.
they've changed it.
They changed it.
It's about 3 years ago, they shifted all of Perdido Key under Panama City.
Good idea. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Time for
So the
one
state-
more question.
Better idea out here?
What's that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just want to continue with the state. In your opinion, the county took over this road out here, would it help your efforts or hinder your efforts in trying to do the conservation? Or does it
That's a good question.
depend on the fishery?
What it kind of depends on if the road swap took place. Obviously, roadways are another great spot for mouse court, because you have long linear spots, you have road shoulders once you get out of the clear zone.
Right.
Certainly, there's an ability to get those areas planted for mice to move more freely across the island. You know, anything that facilitates mice shifting around and getting to other areas of habitat that maybe they aren't currently is always going to be a good thing. And so, from that perspective, if it was a county road, then it's a county right-of-way, and those controls make it a lot easier to make those types of things happen.
All right, so
So it's,
And lighting and all that?
Well, the lighting, I mean, we can utilize, turtle lights, to illuminate the roadway, so there's ways to light it.
We have two questions behind here, Ben. Go ahead.
The leave no trace laws, so things like wooden chairs can be
Yep.
left right next to the line of the beach, as Vista Del Mar has all their wooden chairs every night.
So it's, and I apologize, I think I had it on the slide, but didn't illustrate it. When it passed, for the beach chair vendors, they have an enormous investment, obviously, in their infrastructure, on those chairs. We gave them until January of 2020, so they'll have one more season that they're able to utilize those chairs. In the summer of 2020, they'll have to go to a completely stackable or removable product. So it was, because we still want to be friendly to those in particular that have done business historically out here. But it's, we also, as, this becomes marketed more and more as an environmental destination.
It was okay for them to do that this summer to have those all there.
So, well, two parts. This summer, next summer, it is okay for them to be there. The risk that they still bear is if we have a turtle come up, interact with the chair, and leave, they're still potentially subject to enforcement under the Endangered Species Act for that take.
Okay,
So-
so there is one that just went right down in front of
Yep.
the subdivision right there. Yeah, Arizona.
So it's kind of like as we worked with all the condos owners this year, it was effective this year. And we worked with the condos to get plans, how are they going to address it? Because, you have people that maybe have been renting the same unit for 20 years and for the last 15, they put that tent out there, they've gotten used to it. And, it was the matter of get the condos or the other rental units to be able to change things in the rental policies.
Yeah, I just thought it was unusual for new condos to have to, doing that, saying there's a parking lights in the garage. That's
Yeah.
all over the beach.
And-
for the turtles.
And so that's one of those things we're working with is, over the next couple of years, I expect, the beaches to continue to get darker and we'll get all those obstructions off.
Quick question.
I was wondering whether, the plan is talking about land not developed now. Is there any work going on with existing properties to maybe change the landscaping to mitigate on already developed properties?
I'll kind of, sorry, I gotta say yes and no. I have not been pursuing, other than one condo that's talking about voluntarily doing it on conversion of sod to coastal native plants. And it's, the big deal for them is they spend an enormous amount of money maintaining landscaping. And they're seeing it just as a large cost. We are actively working with everyone that we've identified that has problematic lighting to work and help assist with retrofits. Some of the condos, it's a 2-year process. You let them know, hey, you got a problem. They go and try to find out how much money is it going to cost, and then they got to go back to the association, and then they got to allocate the money, get bids. Generally, to retrofit a condo, it's normally not fast. It's usually 1 year to 2 years. But we are actively working with identified properties.
Well, Tim said he'd stick around. We're here, we got the room till 9, so let's, we'll move on with the program. Thank you, Tim, for taking time out of your day. We appreciate it very much. First off, any new members in the room, please stand up and tell us who you are. And Dan has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody doesn't know I'm Dana, President of the Chamber of Commerce, and I just want to say hello and thank you for joining. One of our missions this year is to build a better business community, which in turn will build a better community in general. So I appreciate all your help in coming out. Just want to call attention to why this meeting took place. We recently sent a couple surveys out to our members, and the biggest question that was asked was, what is the HC plan? Which is why this meeting came about. So when you see surveys come out, if you really want to get involved, answer those surveys appropriately. Let us know what you want to hear. Let us help put it together and get the information out to you. Another big thing, board nominations. If you really want to get involved with the community, it's the best way to get involved with this organization and helping making the change. Definitely stop by, see me, pick up a board form. Let's chit chat for a second and see if we can help you
are looking for members?
Oh, yes, we do have 3 other communities. We have the Business Retention Gyms Committee, which meets every third Thursday
Correct.
of the month. Advocacy is every third Wednesday of the month, which of course Ms. Ann is on as well. And we also have a Military Council, which meets every third Tuesday of the month. Military Council is very important to us. We are a military town, so we definitely want to keep sure we support our troops and support the community that supports them. So if you have any questions, my card's on the table. I'm always open for walk-ins. Ryan, see me, I'm here for you.
All right, with that. Freedom Network, I want to take one more shout out to our friends of the library. Thank them again for being here and sponsoring today's meeting.